Hello, welcome to episode 3 of the Mind Shift Experiment. I am one of your hosts, Carter Brown.
And I'm Amanda Knox, and we are here with our guest today.
April West. Hi. Yes, it's me. The April West. The one.
Yes.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for doing this. This is very important work, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it.
Honestly, thank you for saying yes. We have so much to get into today, but we definitely want to start by expressing our gratitude for our launch and our first 2 episodes. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for the support and love that you guys have shown us. It has not gone unnoticed.
What are we here to say? Why is April West in the building?
We are diving into the illusion of identity today. And that's why we asked April to be on. I actually have known her for coming on 5 years now. We met our 4 or 5 years. We met in 2021. July 4th, 2021.
July 4th, that's right. In the
Exactly when we
pool of
met.
the River Green neighborhood in Canton, Georgia.
Never
Yes.
will we ever forget that moment, though, is
So
ingrained
gross,
in
man.
us forever because it was the most divine timing of
It
a
was
moment.
ordained.
It was ordained. It was, I mean, if that wasn't organized, like an organized meeting, I don't know what was, because the things that spiraled after are unreal. I mean, like, how do we even explain that without getting too far in depth?
Well, maybe we should just get in depth, because I think there's some real beautiful truth hiding here. And I know you girls are so excited to talk about this. And we are here to discuss the identity of illusion, as you called it, Amanda, right? And I think this is about shedding a lot of the constructs that we've built around what we call the self. And it's when you get stuck in those that you start to realize that you're coding your own reality in a way that you actually don't want to be a part of anymore. And so when you lean into the trust, the resonance, the organization, the patterns, the synchronicities that you start to see, you pay attention to those, and it becomes a knowing. And when you step into knowing with emotion, there's truth. And I think that's what we're here to talk about, is that we are all that. All of us are that.
Yeah.
And the illusion of separation is just that. It's an illusion. So that's what I think I'm here for.
That is exactly what you're here for. I want to maybe preface, and I dove into this with Carter earlier, but I want to preface why I asked you to be a guest on this.
Okay.
I've watched you go through so many beautiful seasons of life in such a short time frame, but you've done it in a way that left an impact on me every time I saw you dive further and go deeper into the purpose and the meaning of life. And that's the most simple way I know how to put it, right? You are somebody I looked up to, of more of like a guide, if you will. I've watched you, I knew you studied the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and the Bhagavad Gita and all those things to get your yoga certification. And you went through all this. And then I watched you pick up a Bible and never look back. That then shifted you in a lot of different ways. And now I've watched a very recent shift in you that I can't help but I have so many questions, but I don't even want to ask them. I want to just let us dive into this.
They'll come
And
through.
what really started it, because I feel like, it goes in line with what we've all been through. I feel like that's the beauty of this, is we all go through that crisis of identity when we become moms.
Hell yeah, you're forced to. There's other
forced to.
paths, but there is no path like motherhood that just strips you down to the raw. You know what I love is the analogy of a butterfly, right? Because we're like, oh, we're butterflies, we transform, metamorphosis. But like what you don't actually consider too often, or I didn't, was that when you go in the chrysalis, you melt, you become a goop. You went from a bug to goo. And then you reemerged as a butterfly. So like, what does motherhood do but push you into a goop of what you thought you were to build you up into this? Motherhood is the best peek into the true self, in my opinion. But you asked about when did it start, or how did it start? And that's like an impossible question to answer, because it's like a domino, right? Like every little thing. I've been on this path my whole life. It's just the remembering that comes in such a divine way. And you're like, shit, I know exactly why I'm here because all of that led me to this. Like, remember, Amanda, you'll remember coming to my house and you looked in my pantry and you saw the Crisco shortening and you're like, get that out of your pantry. And I was like, get out of my pantry. Like,
You literally said, "Get
what?
out of my pantry. I can't handle that right now."
I was so pissed. I was like, "You're coming up in my house, judging my ingredients?" But now I know I'm like, "Oh my God, why did I have that? Why did I have the Costco version of that, which is even crazier?" So it's always been an awakening. And it's beautiful when you see the people that have been put on your path for very purposeful reasons, not just purposeful, like faith kingdom purpose. And then you're like, oh, wow, thank you, God, for getting me here to see that. And so you were part of my awakening, just as it sounds like I was yours, because I didn't even want to be a mom. Remember? Like you
Mhm.
had three young boys, beautiful boys. Just love being around them. And I didn't even want to be a mom. I told you that. And now here I am. Like, not only a mom, I have a motherhood podcast, so I'm fully leaning into mom. And yeah, I'm just stripping it all away in real time right in front of my girls,
It's
so
been amazing to watch too because I was like, "Here's a link to this binder about, things that we should
the
talk
book,
about."
the
And then you had a
gems.
whole podcast on it. You were like, "And this
Girl,
is
you set
how
me.
I."
You are the reason I stopped reading, like, nonfiction fun and, like, Nicholas Sparks books to, like, actually reading about real shit, and now I can't stop. So, yeah, that's how it started, motherhood.
I just wanted to know, why didn't you wanna be a mother?
Gosh, well, first let me say this, Carter. I've been dying to say this since I listened to the first episode, and your story, like, when it moved you to tears, it also moved me to tears because addiction is a very big part of my history. Not for me, but for my mother. I was the daughter of someone who took that journey. And I'm realizing now that all of it happened for such a beautiful reason. The things that break you down are also the things that sharpen you. And when you recognize that those traits, those characteristics, those behaviors, those decisions are actually reframed into a spiritual purpose, it's like, oh, okay. But that's a long way of answering. I just didn't want to fuck any children up. I didn't want to be the reason that somebody's childhood was warped and broken and harsh. So I just was like, why would I risk that? Like, who am I to do a better job than what I had?
I get that, I resonate with that. I also didn't think I wanted to be a mother, and then I recovered for nearly a year in bed, and my niece was it was between the 1 to 2 age, and my sister would come and visit all the time, and my niece would just lay in bed with me, and she healed me. She made me be like,
Mhm.
"I want this. How could I ever have thought I didn't want this?"
Can you say more about that exactly? Like what she made you feel when you said that?
She brought love to me in a way that I wanted to reciprocate and knew that I had love to give.
Yeah.
It made me realize how naive I
Mm,
was to think that I didn't need this, that my inner child didn't need this. I
mm.
mean, preparing for this podcast, I mean, let alone the last 6 to 8 months, like, I've had some unlockings of memories that, just have shook me to my core. And I've been a mother for almost 4 years now, and it's really packed a punch as of the last year. But I think that's also because I'm stepping into what I believe is my soul's purpose.
Yes.
And I am needing to deal with these things, or else I wouldn't be able to move forward because the body keeps the
Yes.
score.
The body keeps the score, but also scripturally speaking, God tells us that he who can trust with a little, he can trust with a lot. So what you said about going on your purpose, your spiritual purpose, is if he can trust you with those smaller things, he'll get you prepared for the war you want to go in because you think you're ready, but he's still got to prepare you. And so as you lean into that purpose, there's always going to be a lot of friction. Yeshuani calls it the collapse. When you break a recursive pattern, there's that moment of destabilization because it's new and it's different. And it feels like it won't sustain, but if you patiently sit there and trust, that you will get what you're supposed to get for this next phase, that's what we have to do. We just have to trust
Mm.
and remember. And so I love that because your niece showed you love, and probably a fresh love that didn't feel like it was like hidden with judgment because you were just a year recovered, which I'm sure is a lot of the love you felt from your family. It's like, yeah, but like, gotta be careful. You never know. And so to have such a raw and tender and judgment-free love is like, I think, what we're all after in this. So thanks for sharing
For
that.
sure. Yeah. No, I was curious to know what your answer was, and I guess a lot of us feel the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. But yours is true as mine because it's like what you said is, how can I experience this love and not want to reciprocate it? And that's when it happened after my husband and I got married. I was like, oh, wait, this is kind of like too good not to try to share with the next generation. Like maybe we can shape this to be different, this little light of mine. So,
And that so many of us are feeling that way, that light, that
mhm,
we feel like change can't happen.
mhm,
Well, and what's amazing is
exactly.
they say, I mean, the ultimate remembering is from love.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that is why there is such a critical turning point once you become a motherhood, because you feel and
Have to
you have
love.
that unconditional love where, it's funny. I remember at one point even questioning, like, is God a woman? Because only women are portals to this world, and the
Well,
love we
God
can
was the
feel,
ultimate portal, was he
right?
not?
The ultimate
He
portal. So the
that was yeah.
understanding of that, love and embodying it. I mean, when it comes down to it, and not that we're going to take it there, but when you look at it, you strip back all the religious texts, from ancient, from the pyramid texts to everything out there. At the core of it all is love. That's
That's
it.
right. Yep, yep,
So no
yep.
wonder it makes sense that motherhood, your first opportunity to literally have that unconditional love, sparks that remembrance. And it's going to look completely different for everybody based off their generational patterns and trauma and upbringing and situational awareness, where they're at, time frame, things like that. It's just going to look so very different. And I know we're all on such a different but similar path.
Yeah.
And it's just all,
To
it's
me, it
really
doesn't feel so different. Granted, I see it from social media and like glimpses, right? But I think we're all talking about the same thing,
right.
right? Remember, Amanda, I don't know if I told you this. I've told a lot of people because I think it's brilliant. But one time, my husband and I, when we were still dating, we were in the hot tub in Florida. And the moment I fell in love with him is he had told me about perspective. I'm like, yeah, okay, perspective. But he's like, no, really. Like, and he just draws with his finger on the little cement that's right next to the hot tub. And he's like, what did I just draw? And I was like, well, you just drew a 6. And he's like, no, I drew a 9. And I was like, wait, yeah. So I think we're all looking at it, the same truth, through the lens of our own experiences and our implicit bias and our pain. And we're looking at it from here, but mine looks different. It's like, yeah, okay, well, you were raised with a mom and a dad. So, yeah, yours is going to look a little different, and we're all just looking at the same truth within our own little. And I think that's what we're here to talk about today is like what happens when we shred those little limiting beliefs and those constructs so we can open our aperture and see that we're all speaking about the same truth, right? Like it is science. You can explain it with science. It is math. It is music, resonance and frequency and harmony and tuning forks is the same thing as spirit. And that's, I think, what we're here to talk about is stripping away all of those illusions and all the bullshit that keeps us from the all remembering.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is exactly it. I mean, honestly, the question that I want to ask you, and I'm coming at this, I'm asking both of you, is, what happens when the roles we were given fall away? That construct of our identity, then what starts to shape our reality? What are those pivotal moments that you remember, or you're like, those were the pivotal moments to create me to be exactly where I am today?
So for me, um, How God realizes I need to see things is to be smacked in the face with it. That's how I prayed to find my husband. The words that I prayed daily were, God, make it so obvious that you smack me in the face with it, that I cannot deny that this man is my husband. And I'd say that he and I fell in love without speaking because we went on a trip with some coworkers where he and I did not speak, but we were in the same car. And as we're driving up to this lake house, I'm feeling this like tug, like this pull towards him. And I remember sitting in the back seat being like, why do I
I
feel this
okay.
way? This is weird. And little do I know, he's feeling the exact same way. And so we literally spoke about relatively surface level things that weekend, never once communicating to one another that we're feeling this thing. So that is how God has to make things obvious for me. And how I even
Mm,
got to this path of meeting Amanda, starting direct selling, now doing this podcast, wanting to do high level coaching for about 6 to 8 months. I would see the number 4 everywhere. And when I say it was everywhere, it got to the point I was like, okay, God, I am fully aware. Like, you have my attention. I don't know what you are trying to get my attention for, but I am aware to it. And at that time, looking back, I would say I was totally depressed. I had like 2 friends in my life. My husband and we were great, but like we both were separately depressed, worried about money, worried about our future, realizing we don't
mm.
want this April to be the same April as last year, but not knowing how to get there. Like we both were fighting this internally ourselves. And so I would look at the oven timer and it would be 444 degrees. I would stop the nursing timer on my phone and it would be 4 minutes and 44 seconds. Like every time I looked at the clock, it would be 12:44, 11:40, literally. And then one day I just decided to pray this prayer of, hey, God, I want to do network marketing because I was so desperately needing friends. Like I was so desperately needing community. I couldn't just have my 2 friend group text message where we saw each other, every now and then. My soul was craving for other like-minded women to have camaraderie in. And if network marketing was how I was going to get there, fine. Like, okay, I can put my cringe aside to make that happen. I just needed to get myself out of a box. And I just said, like, God, like, please, I would like to do this. And I said this
Hmm.
specific friend that I asked to do this with, and he literally answered it to a T 2 weeks later. I said, it has to be a company that I align with. It can't be a company with a sketchy
Listen to you
history.
writing God some orders.
I just was like, it has to be products I have to actually want to use. They have to be non toxic. They have to work, blah, blah, blah. Literally to a T. God answered it to the next.
Didn't you say, and it has to be with my friend Amanda?
Yeah, and it has to be with my friend Amanda. And
You
two
didn't
weeks.
give him very many options, yeah.
No. And when I tell you 2 weeks later, he answered it to a T. Not only that, but the day I enrolled was April 8th, 4/8, which is 444.
Oh my gosh, this is such a funny
And so
story.
me stepping into that and being like blind faith and being like, okay, like, wow, it was so undeniable. My husband was like, yeah, 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 sign up. Okay, like, cool. And the rest of my life has completely unfolded ever since. And it was all because I said yes. And now, I was operating in my zone of genius, I would say, as a mother. I really enjoyed motherhood, but I was not at my prime. I was not where I knew life could just be like smooth sailing always. And that is stepping into what we're doing today, stepping into doing this podcast by stepping into coaching and helping other women establish their zone of excellence and getting themselves to that. And so for me, God had to just smack me in the face with it. And if it was signs, and that was something else I had to deconstruct as someone who identified as a Christian at the time as, okay, I'm seeing angel numbers. What does this mean? And like, I talked to some friends and they're like, gosh, stay away. I'm like, but like, how does Satan know when I'm going to look at the clock? Like,
Man,
omnipresent,
I have so many thoughts.
you
I
know?
have
And
so many
so
thoughts about that. Yeah.
and I just was like, no, I'm trusting this. And that was the remembering I needed to have is like, I don't care about what anyone else's experiences. I'm trusting my own and trusting that God is giving me this guidance that I've been asking for every single day for 5 years. So that's how
Okay.
I get to this point is you have to smack
Can
me in the
I
face with it.
riff on your story
Yeah, I
first
want to
before I
hear all
answer
your
this?
thoughts.
Because I want to challenge your assumptions about God having to slap you in the face with it. I don't think that's true. I think you're just somebody who needs a lot of validation from your logical left hemisphere, right? We just kind of need like, okay, but are you sure, God? And I want to share this because this I think has a lot of truth. Yeshuani, I don't know if you girls are too familiar, but I just recently sent it to Amanda. This is one of her articles on fractal mastery. So listen to this, and then I want to hear what you think about it. What is commonly called intuition. Okay, so the prayer that you had about it has to be non-toxic, it has to be loved, it has to align. It's like you intuitively already knew because again, you said you remember. But wait, what is commonly called intuition is the brief, unfiltered recognition of these patterns before the conscious mind, i.e., left hemisphere, logic, linear thinking, intervenes and rationalizes them away. So you will get an answer to a prayer that is probably very subtle. It doesn't have to be a slap in the face, and God will give it to you. But because you want to rationalize it away with the left hemisphere, are you sure? Are you sure it's not this, it's not that? Then he's like, okay, boom. And then you already knew. You had the laundry list and it checked the box. You already knew you were going to do all of Ada with Amanda Network Marketing. You intuitively knew because you remembered. But then your Satan, you said Satan, you had Christianity in quotes. I want to offer this for anybody who's willing to listen, is I want you to change the perception of Satan because the Satan in the Bible is probably different than the little fiery red guy who's out to get you. I think Satan is the ego.
Yes.
The ego is the one that wants to hold you into that left hemisphere, needing validation and needing all of these details because he will keep you trapped in your recursive pattern. You stay on the loop because it's so efficient and it's so familiar, right? But the ego wants to keep you there. Your spirit doesn't want to stay there because your spirit remembered where you're supposed to go,
Can I ask
right?
you a question? I don't want to interrupt you or this
Yeah,
thought
go
process,
ahead. This
but I
is what
have to
this
know when
is.
you came to this realization because I'm wondering if we came to this exact realization at the same exact.
Girls, I keep telling you about my friend Christina.
You did.
Okay. Christina is behind a very cool Instagram that is very new, but I think it's called The Unveiling Moment. I'll have to confirm that. Put it in the show notes, please. Christina and I met in Atlanta around the same time, Amanda, that you and I had met when I got started at Woodstock City and I was the middle school ministry, right, for the 6th grade girls. Christina was my co-leader. Okay. And we managed, somebody put us in charge of 20 plus rising 6th graders, like 5th grade girls going to 6th grade. Me and her, the spiritual stewards. And I remember one time she's like, I just have a really hard time understanding this whole thing of the obsession about Jesus. And I was like, blasphemy. What? Literally, I was like, what? You really can't say that. And you really can't say that as like a middle school minute. Like, don't say that at church, right? Because I was like, that's my linear logical trap. And not to say I don't believe in Christ. Please don't misunderstand me. Christ is a very important part of this whole thing. He unlocked the template for unconditional love so we could try to follow it. Nobody else. And there's no other path in, by the way. You can love Buddha and what he represents, but Jesus is the one who died to unlock the one fractal version of this that got it right. Okay. But I remember when she said that, I was like, I got to talk to her about that. So that's when it started. I don't know, probably 2 years ago. I'm so bad with time. 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's been a rapid unraveling since I stepped into full-time motherhood. Because remember, I was trapped. I'm in the corporate worker 8 to 5, kill myself. I really care about my quarterly goals too.
Remember, April goes to you one time. It makes me feel bad when you talk about people that are stuck in corporate America. Or you worded it very kindly, but like you told me how I was making you feel talking
Yeah.
because for me in my mind, viewed corporate America as societal enslavement. And I was very loud about that because
Girl, you were
I
so right about that. And I was like, because here we go. I mean, I think we might be finally getting to this topic of the illusions, right? But that was one of the illusions that I gripped really tight, like white knuckled that, because that's what I thought got me through all of the bullshit that could have like really held me back in my youth, because I
well,
did
you were
come from a
very
troubled
successful.
start. And I was
You
very
bossed
successful.
hard.
And I got a lot of good girls and I got a lot of shining stars and I got the, oh, people like me. I'm doing well. I'm a good girl. I'm doing well.
So it was very unique to me because you were so in love with it. I mean, it looked like with that path
I
that
wasn't in love. I just wasn't conscious.
mm,
I wasn't living. Like I was living, but I wasn't living in alignment with like what I'm really doing here.
mm,
Know? And I think we share something similar. At least that's what I've kind of pieced together from the things I've consumed, which is we all are just trying to share the liberation you can feel when you do step into your purpose, like
yes.
your kingdom purpose. I've recently come to discover is like I want to be a conduit for healing. I want people to know that it's okay to talk like this, feel like this. It's okay not to show up perfectly, because if we don't acknowledge that truth, we're going to be stuck and suppressed in that loop that we've continued to follow.
Yeah.
Is that making sense?
Yes.
For sure. Well,
100%.
it's
Okay.
you being your inauthentic self.
It's just ignoring something that is desperate to be brought to light. So you said, Amanda, God is love. And I agree. And you said this about every religion. You're like, at the core of it all, of all the ones I've read, I haven't read them all, but I agree with that. God is love. And when you think about God as love, but also as light, because if you think about the creation story, there was a nothingness, a vast nothingness, and God breathed life, and boom, there it was. And God is light and love. And if you think about all of the dark, harbored, just things that you don't really want to expose to people, like all your little worms, if you keep them in the dark when they're just begging to be brought to light, what happens when you bring them to light? You're met with love, right? And that's what I want to do for people is like when you feel like you have something that you don't want to bring to light because you're afraid that it's going to be shameful or you're going to be discarded or you're going to be judged. I want people to know like you can have a psychologically safe place to explore that because we're meant to. We're called to. We're called to be sanctified. It's a sanctification, it's a cleansing, it's a pruning, but it's all meant for good. So I encourage if people are trying to consider like what are the illusions of the self, it's like what's all the dark stuff that's propping up this version of you that you're presenting? Because the one you're presenting is not the one you are. Right?
Yeah.
Well, it's like that concept where there's a million different yous out there because everyone has a different perception of you.
Yes. And you know what? Christine and I were geeking about this when we went to Sedona because we both kind of had this visual of like shuffling through a Rolodex of all the different versions of you that you've been, and just kind of like calling out that one and being, huh, yeah, that was also me, And it's true, like we are all of these versions, but we're also none of them, right? So your question, I'm going to come back to it finally, Amanda, which was like the pivotal moment.
Yeah.
I think the bigger question is, what do you identify as the self? Who are you? Because you're not Carter Brown who's starting up a personal coaching program. You're not. So who are you? You're the observer of this Carter Brown who's network marketing and coaching and doing that. But like, what are you when you're 20 years from now? You're going to be still that observer, but what are you going to be wearing that time? And so I think when we peel away even all of the things that might introduce yourself as, it's like, I am love. I'm love. And how does that look? How does that look? It changes every day. I don't know. That's a question
It
worth
changes every day. Well, and that
thinking about.
depends on everybody. I mean, it depends on everybody's perception.
Yeah.
grief process, their trauma, their not their trauma. I mean, that's just such a loaded question. Is it even possible to really answer? No.
Yeah. But I think it's important just to even noodle on it, even if you can't answer it. I think that's the challenge. That's the humor that God has. It's like,
Well, my
keep
gut
trying to
reaction when
figure
you
it out.
asked, like, "Who
Tell
are
me.
you?" My reaction was, "I am love." And then I had this weird thought, I'm like, in 50 years, if I'm wearing muumuus everywhere and, they have crazy wild colors and I've got a martini in hand and I'm on a yacht, that is a
That's
version of my
already what you're gonna be because that's your
probably,
intuition.
probably, which I receive
You're going
that.
out of soul, experiencing its next evolution. I just
I
don't
mean,
know.
that is also the truth. That is also the truth. We're talking about the illusions of the self.
Mhm.
And we asked the question of what is the self? And
Yeah.
Carter is love. And I think I'm some version of love as well. But in order to be yourself, your true essence, you have to acknowledge all of those versions of you in your Rolodex.
Yeah.
And that means spending a lot of time with the ones that you have kept away and folded really small and hope that nobody ever pulls out. Those parts of you, this is called disintegration in Carl Jung's work. Disintegrated, like you had said in your last episode, dis-ease, disharmony, when you're not living in truth because you haven't spent time witnessing the parts of you that you don't really want to spend time even thinking about, probably have some huge memory suppression of. Those are the parts that you have to bring forward into that light, into that love, so you can be yourself. It's another stripping away. But if you aren't spending time with that exiled part, it's like a little anchor that's just holding you back from your awakening, your advancement, your elevation, your evolution, whatever word you want to use. It's the same thing, your expansion. And I have a recent story I could share if we wanted to get into examples of that, but I
Yeah.
would love to hear your thoughts about it.
No, I love it.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
wanna hear it.
I want to hear
Okay.
it.
Okay. So, before I moved to Georgia, I was in Fort Myers at Gartner, where I met Hunter, right? But before the glory days of meeting Hunter, I was trapped in that corporate world of being like a good little girl and a great sales girl and winner circle and all the fun things. I was trapped in a deeply abusive relationship for 2.5 years with my boyfriend at the time. And I had always sought men who were broken. And I think that's because I was energetically just putting out like I was also broken. And, it's a resonance thing. So you're going to attract those people. If I was the light I am now, I would have tried to shine it a little brighter, but mine was also pretty dark. So being stuck in a relationship with that, it was passionate, but it was not a good place to be and for a long period of time. And towards the tail end of the relationship, I just became a monster too. And I was physically abusive to him. And yeah, it was just like one of those really toxic situations. I became a very weird version of myself, a distortion of truth, but it was true because it was me. And so we ended up finally breaking up for the final time, right? And then 2 weeks later, I basically meet Hunter, my husband and my soulmate and the father to my beautiful daughter. And yeah, we moved to Georgia a year later, got engaged, and a month after, no, 2 days after Hunter proposed to me, I got an email from this ex. And it was like a wish you well, right? I never acknowledged it because I was like, how dare he try to interrupt my happy, And the next month he took his own life. And I didn't realize, I feel a heaviness in my chest sharing this, but I didn't realize it, how important it was for me to process that emotion. But I felt like, how dare I feel sadness or mourn the loss of a man that's been out of my life when I'm so happy and feeling so much love. So fast forward literally years, what, 3 years? All of a sudden, I just can't get this relationship out of my head. And I'm like, it's everywhere. Synchronicities, the patterns, the music that we used to listen to together. I thought I almost saw him and had to do a double take. And I'm like, okay, what? What do I have to? Why am I thinking about Scott? And normally, when you're thinking about an ex boyfriend, passionate ex-boyfriend, no less. You certainly don't tell your husband, but I did. I was like, I'm having dreams. I'm hearing music. I'm doing all of this. And the way I was met with such love from my husband was like, of course, you're mourning the loss of someone. And he was so patient and so like, what rational husband would say that? And the way I felt held and comforted in a situation that I thought was going to bring a lot of shame to my marriage and a lot of mistrust or whatever, all the bullshit I convinced myself in my left side brain, it wasn't true. And instead, it was harmony, it was understanding, it was patience. And so I sat with the feelings that I thought I was going to have to hide from my husband, and I'm journaling and I have a free writing experience. And I finally realized from this whole long ass story that the one thing I had to do was go back and get that version of me. Flip through my Rolodex to 22, 24-year-old April, 25-year-old April, and say, hey, do you remember who you were and how you were? Like, it wasn't all him, and those were you. And when I sat there with her and said, oh, I'm not meant to leave you behind. I learned a lot from you, and I'm sorry because you were just doing the best you were doing, and you had no idea. You were so lost because I was going to church. I was trying to find it. I was trying to find my way out. So I just realized like I had to go back and get her. And since that experience, I've gone back to get so many younger versions of myself. And even my young ones that I have forgotten as a child, I go back and I rub her hair and I let her know it's going to be okay. Because you have such love in your life. So, exiled parts of you, suppressed parts of you, the parts of you that you have a very dark memory and history of, like, those are the ones you need to give some attention to. Because once you do and you bring them to the light, you are literally light, like lighter. You don't have to carry all that, right? Thank you for
You're
letting
hitting
me go on
hard.
and on.
No, it was beautiful
I could
because
listen to you talk all day.
You're so sweet.
I would tell you to
Yeah.
get a podcast because your voice is so beautiful, but you already have that.
She do.
Yeah. It's a hot pan over there, a real hot pan. Uh,
I wanna shout your podcast out because April is a host for Moms Off the Record, and it is so, so good. If you're a mom like us, crunchy or scrunchy or even thinking about it, an amazing resource right there. And you've had some really incredible
Thanks.
guest speakers on too that have been
Yeah,
so
we have
proud of
some
watching your journey. If I weren't so far
pretty
removed from
cool.
it, I was very much like you. I didn't know to do the podcast thing when I was in my early 20s, but when I had kids, and went through what I did, I didn't have support or help. All I had was my ability to use Google and read
Mm-hmm.
books, and that is all I had. I didn't have friends. I didn't know anybody going through it. It was a rough space to be, so it would have saved my life and my mental health.
Well,
And I had something like what you have now. So
come on. If you want to buck against every system that is meant to sever the relationship between the mother baby dyad, you come on over to Moms Off the Record because we go hard in the paint about the predatory industries that are trying to attack motherhood because it is a sacred bond. And as
yes.
we are talking about, this is a God given bond. Like, we're not just having children to expand our family. Like, no, we are birthing the healing of the next generation. Like, the stuff that we're doing now is the stuff that our great grand maternal figures are like, she's finally here. She's here. So don't let industry rob you of that sacred connection. Don't. It's too pivotal. It's too important.
And you know what's
So
crazy?
thanks. We'll
We
plug it.
embody a very parallel thing here because we are stripping you away from the illusion and the doctrine of societal thinking for success and life and mindset and spirituality and things like that. And so it's funny how hand in hand they all go together because the rise ultimately comes from this new journey of life. For us, it was motherhood. Our awakening came with motherhood greatly, and then it just spirals from there. And I think that is really incredible. It speaks to who we are, to our like on our soul level, and what we're passionate about with what we're showing up and talking about. Truly.
I wanted to rewind real quick because I had this thought and it will not leave me. So I feel like this
Lean into that,
will be
sister.
beneficial for the listeners is when you're going through that Rolodex of old versions of yourself and you sit with that, can you give any more guidance about accepting the release of any emotions that you might have? How can you accept that old version of yourself and not be triggered by her again?
Ooh, that is a divine question because I'm literally working through that with my mother right now because I shared a little bit about her struggles. How how do you do it? So yeah, you have to sit with the emotion. The challenge is a lot of us have been raised in an environment where we have this very important brain adaptation where if emotions weren't safe to explore as a youth, whether that's being punished, shut down, or mirrored. If you don't have a safe way of or template of navigating difficult emotions, then this is going to be even more destabilizing for you because you don't know what to do. So, what's worked for me is giving it the full kaleidoscope of all the things. So, for example, with Scott, my ex boyfriend, I felt a whole range of things. At first, it was like confusion. Why am I doing this? And then a lot of weeping of just sadness of a relationship that was lost. It actually forced me to reach out to people from my past and only to find out that some of them who I didn't really know, just knew through a connection, are also on some God given purpose from this death. I was like, oh, okay, thank you, God. Like, this isn't, I'm not being naughty. I'm doing this because I'm supposed to. I felt sometimes like physiologic response in my body because of the dreams I was having. And instead of being like, oh, people, that's so inappropriate, you have a husband, it was, oh, like, this is my body remembering too. And my body is my temple of my spirit. And God created my body to respond so my spirit would know on a physical level. I was angry for how I couldn't find the email that I didn't respond to. I couldn't find it anywhere. I had all of his other emails saved and that one was gone. So I was like, am I crazy? Did I make all this shit up? I mean, I allowed myself to feel the full breadth of it. I played the music in my car every time, everywhere I went. Eden hated the music, by the way, because it's like a lot of Radiohead and she's just like listens to such different things. So she was like, Mom, not this, not this. So it's like, okay. And I allowed myself to daydream a little bit about what that version could have played out like. And in that whole time, it wasn't until I realized I left my little girl back there that all that other stuff was just an expression trying to point me to that truth. So I would encourage anyone to sit there. And you said to avoid the heartbreak or agitation. I can't remember the word you used,
Just
but
be to be triggered by that remembering of
right.
that version of yourself.
I think the idea is that we're meant to be triggered. I think it's our spirit like rattling the cage to remember that was you. And to remember to show yourself compassion, that you were doing what you thought you had to do to survive, to defend, to protect, to just make it. And yeah, it's not like the most beautiful. I don't love that I've like punched an ex-boyfriend. I think that's pretty gross. I would never do that, right? But I can't say that because I have. And so instead of judging that and saying it's gross, it's showing compassion of like, he mirrored in you a lot of the unresolved anger you had. And it wasn't until you realized that you could solve for that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
This is probably a little off topic, but also not. I don't know. But what, you guys are mentioning triggers, and what comes to mind for me is, now how do you look at triggers that you have from like external triggers, not internal triggers, with the knowing
Mm.
and understanding that you have?
I don't think there's a difference between an external or an internal trigger. I think
I
it's
was
just a reflection.
So did I not tell you this, what, a couple of days ago, Carter? I said I was triggered by something, and I have been diving into my triggers more. Instead of being reactive, I dive into them and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a reflection of this version of me. I was able to dissect it in a way to understand exactly why it triggered me. And that
Yeah,
removed the hostility that I felt. And then was met with empathy and understanding. And at the root of
there's the
empathy and
ticket.
understanding is love.
That's right. Yeah. When you think about um, our calling, if you think about all of New Testament scripture, we're called to do two things. Do you remember?
You're putting me on the
To
spot.
love
Okay.
God with
And repent.
your whole heart, right? To love God. No, don't go repent, girl. That is so old,
No,
baby. That is
I
so
meant
old.
like
That's
repent in the
that's
word
that
that
strict
I
religion.
understand that, which is just change.
Yeah.
It's just change. It's not
Yeah,
I don't think of
change,
repent as the Christian.
recognize.
Yeah.
That's a part of, I think, the greater calling. But if my little test was to love God with your whole might and soul, heart, mind, and soul, and to love your neighbor as though you love yourself. So how can you love your neighbor if you don't have empathy? So when you see someone who's triggering you, I put that in air quotes, it's just a ping into your reality of like, hey, have you noticed this part of you yet?
Mm.
Because that's the part of you that you're just kind of hiding away from yourself. Right? I'll give you an example. As you know, with my motherhood podcast, I'm pretty fucking defensive about my parenting choices because they're hard to live out these choices because it feels like everybody is against this whole thing. And it's true. It's we're not living in Eden. We're living on the other side of heaven. So, yeah, it's meant to bring you down. But I feel really informed about my parenting choices. I don't like people to assume I'm ignorant because I'm not. I'm very well read, I'm very well researched, and I'm very intentional, right? Okay. So my 2.5-year-old daughter is on the scooter, just like ripping ramps, barefoot on this little plastic $6 scooter, going down the ramps at the skate park. And I send videos and pictures and I put it in my shared album so my mom and my aunt out of state can see it. And I was like, look how cool she is, man. She's shredding in 2.5. So I was really happy and proud of her because I thought she was so cool. Well, my Aunt Nancy, my mom's sister, calls me a week later and she's like, April, I just want you to know your number one job is to protect your daughter. And there is no reason why she should be on that scooter without a helmet. And let me just offer you the layers this message fell through and I witnessed in real time before responding. The first pop, I think about like the Plinko board. Do you remember Bob Barker,
Mhm.
the Plinko board? Beep, 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 until it gets down to the bottom. So like the first little ping was like rage, defense, like you're a good mother. And then the second one was that's her wound speaking because she lost her son when he was 16 years old, her only son. She's afraid because she feels like she failed at protecting her child, her one job. And then plink, 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 it went down to April, she loves her daughter. She's really looking out for her. She's worried about her. You're lucky to have so many people love your daughter. And so instead of being like, oh, thanks, Aunt Nancy, I think I know my daughter can shred these ramps, it was, Eden is really capable. She's demonstrated she's capable, but you're right. Accidents can happen. She could bust her head open, and that would have the worst guilt. I would feel overcome to that guilt. So thanks for looking out for us. And I was so proud of how I handled that with like such love that I was like, hell yeah, man. Hell yeah, brother. I did it.
How long did that take
So
you to get there to reply back to that?
she was a phone conversation. It was real time. I
Wow.
was, yeah, like it was, you talk about remembering remember what Yeshwani said, before the conscious mind intervenes and rationalizes. It was just love. Because this is the kind of love that we would have gotten from our ancestors had we been doing the village game. They would all just be peppering in their best intended love. And so, yeah, is Eden going to ride a scooter with a helmet? Yes. Is she capable of doing it without it? Yes. Both are true.
Wow.
Well, so I relate to that. I thought of an
Tell me.
example. This is so trivial, but
It's not.
blush has been my thing. I'm sometimes really great at it, and sometimes in old versions of myself, I'm not that great at it. Especially when I get a new blush and I'm like figuring it out. There's a learning curve for me, but I love blush, okay? And
Okay.
there's this one reel where I'm like, "Dang, I really messed up that blush," but my skin looks so good in it, so I just didn't care, you know? And over Christmas, I'm on a walk with my sister, and she, in the most lovingly way, she's like, "Hey, you should, like, blend it a little bit more," and I'm like, "I know what I'm doing!" And we just continue on the walk, and I'm like, she's just telling me this because she loves me, and I did look like a
Yeah.
fool, you know? Like, so it's like this like realizing like it is okay to get triggered. You're right. Like it is
You're
okay
meant
to get
to. It's meant to be
there.
a learning lesson.
Yes, to
Yeah.
remember. Okay, no, like you're saying, it's the left brain, it's my ego and responding and not liking what I'm hearing.
Mhm.
But when I get down to the core of the message, I'm like, she loves me enough to tell me that.
Mhm. Yeah, she'd tell you if you had broccoli in your teeth before
Yeah,
you went on recording, like, yeah, that
yeah,
would be the kind of love.
yeah,
Totally. I
yeah.
think what we have to consider is, like, why our response who said it? I can't remember who said it. It was a quote, though. There's, like, the stimulus and the response, and presence is about growing the time in between the stimulus and the response. So, like, you when your sister's like, "Hey, maybe just round that out a little bit, a little beauty blender." How could you have grown the space between the response of, "I know what I'm doing," because that, I think, is where we're meant to spend a little bit more time, is the in between.
Yeah, like the
And
pause is
our ego
okay.
tells you, yeah, exactly. The pause is the destabilizer of interrupting the recursive pattern. We're in the loop. We're in the loop. And we see it. We are not the observer of the loop because we are inside of it. So if we just recognize the pattern, oh, she criticized my blush. I want to just defend myself. Oh, if I wait here, shit, I'm like, what do I do here? And it's like, oh, this is somebody who cares about me, you know?
Mhm.
And if we can grow that space between the response and the stimulus, there's new growth there.
I think there's so many friendships that end because either they don't ever feel like they can say the thing in a loving way, or the person doesn't see it as love and they pull away, whereas it was actually done in love. And I want to normalize more of sharing uncomfortable things, but from a loving
Mm,
way in a friendship,
yes.
because how else? Like, I don't want to wait for me to like learn the lesson on myself. Sometimes I need someone else because, like, I'm getting to the point where I can't accept that pause, and I'm like, "You know what?
Yeah,
She's putting the mirror in front of me, she's doing this because she loves
that's
me,"
right.
and, like, those are the relationships I'm craving right now because I spent so long in my last 3 decades of, maybe friendships did end because I let my ego get in the way and take over, like, "Oh, that person, they're
Mm,
criticizing me and da 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 da," whereas maybe it was all done in a loving way and, sorry.
yeah. I think we have to remember so Carl Thompson's work, I don't know if you're familiar with him, like on the last pages of this book called The Anatomy of the Soul. And what you had mentioned is having friendships that you don't really feel like you can convict one another. And like, what are those? Carl Thompson puts it to love is to witness, right? To witness someone and to be witnessed by someone is love. So if you can only do the, hey girl, skin looks beautiful, on fleek, 10 out of 10. Fire emoji. Like, I'm sorry, but there's no growth there for me. I need a love that refines, uplifts, convicts, and restores. Friends don't go there, then c'est la vie, because, like, there's no growth there. So I think that your sister convicted you about your blush was actually an act of love and witnessing.
For
Yeah.
sure. For sure. And like I still to this day, she's gonna listen to this and we'll laugh about it. But I still to this day have not apologized to her for how I responded to that.
Girl,
I'm
you
like, I
need to go
still think
back and
about
do
it.
that. Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing is like acknowledging like the reaction of like, "Hey man, I don't know what that was."
I want to bring this into a conversation because I have literally been sitting with conviction the last few weeks about how some of the things I handled, like some of the ways I handled leaving my last company and how I handled some things that I have literally in my mind wrote up apologies. And I've really been on this, teeter totter, if you will, of emotions on like, why would I send this? I'm not trying to reopen anything, but also, is this just an ego driven validation thing that I just need to get it out? And so it's just been kind of an internal battle
Mm.
between is this my ego or is this me just trying to lead from love? Because at the end of the day, it was, my neighbor situation that made me strip back the layers of everything in my life, every situation, who I was, who I wanted to, who I wish I was and how I wish I handled things. And, when I really look at things, I understand every single person's perspective or perception from a place of perspective. And it's a completely different form of alignment than I've ever been in before because I'm able to have that lead with that authentic love and empathy to where there is no animosity, there's no hate, but I also see where I played a negative role. And is it my ego wanting validation of, hey, like, I'm so sorry I played that part. I'm sorry I played this specific character in your story in our story. And it's going to look
I
so
don't think
different.
that sounds like ego at all. I think the question you have to pose for yourself is like, what do you and how do you intend the apologies to be received? Like, what's the response to those? Because if it's like oh, it's okay, you're so right, like,
See, I haven't
forgive
even
me,
thought about
then
that. I haven't thought about
okay,
because the response doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's the acknowledging for, hey, I was living in a place of such confidence that I was right and I was on
yeah,
my
that's
own
called
hierarchy.
humility.
Well,
Yeah,
and that's where I struggled because my moral compass is so high. And so when I feel that something has been wrong to me, I am like, this has to be made right. Like, why is this not being made right? Why is no one acknowledging it? It was I
then you
placed it
need
on
to
such
do
a
that.
high place for me that when I stepped back and I removed everything, and I was like, that was a really egotistical, selfish way to handle it in those
Oh,
moments. And now that I can see that, I don't align with the person I was, a year ago even. So
I think you
it's
need
been a
to
wild journey.
I love that you shared that. And I think it's something that you should offer because, okay, the whole biblical narrative is about redemption. And redemption requires humility. Like, who led a more humiliating life than Jesus Christ, right? So if you can acknowledge, like, hey, I really was operating with what I thought was best, but I was severely misguided or just, slightly misguided. And I see the ways that I could have, I showed up and maybe influenced, like that humility is biblical. So I think that's all about the redemptive story of love.
Well, and
Love
it's
is
crazy because
redemption.
what's funny is I brought this up once before to somebody and she goes, "No, if you re-enter that karmic cycle, it's just going to it literally is like re-entering you into that karmic cycle. And I never aligned with that, nor did I really understood what that meant, because I feel like the only way to do something like that is to keep repeating the same things over and over, doing the same things without learning any lessons, right? But with this, it's
Hmm.
me just acknowledging that wow, I was wrong and how I handled things was wrong. And in hindsight, I just wish I would have been able to look at things different. But at the end of the day, that wasn't my path in that moment. And I genuinely think everything has just come full circle with the whole, journey of remembering. Truly, it was stripping the illusion of who I thought I was. And it's put me in this place where I'm sure a lot of people notice, especially with my social media presence, I really stepped back and I started being very intentional with what I was sharing because if it didn't feel fully aligned, I didn't have the creativity or the energy to put it out.
Hmm.
And I did it a few
Mhm.
times to see how my body would physically react to it and how my soul would react to it. And it reacted in a way that I was just like, I don't like this. So how do
Mm.
I think that's the hardest part is I was talking to somebody this morning and I was like, I feel like I've been through 37 spiritual awakenings in my lifetime. And every time I think, oh my God, this is it. I'm all knowing. I've, and then this time I realize I don't know anything. I know nothing. That's actually
Mhm.
all I know is that I know
Yeah.
absolutely nothing, and I feel like a student of life to where I'm receptive. I wanna
Yeah.
hear everything. I wanna hear your point of view and yours, and I wanna read this, and I wanna consume this, and at the same time, there's also this part of me where I search so hard for answers, and then I realize I don't need to know all the answers because I have all the answers. I just have to
That's
remember them.
right. That's right. Yeah. I understand what your friend is talking about with the karmic cycle. I think what she's talking about is the recursion, which is when it's a self-repeating pattern. It references itself to continue. And so if you were, this is different to me because you're coming in with an evolved, an awakened, and elevated part of you going back and restoring with humility and love a situation that you don't feel really aligned on now. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that in my purview.
Well, it
Same.
reminds me of like the 12 steps and you make amends in one of the steps. Like they say, like a lot of times you making the amends is for yourself, not for the other person, because the other person's probably forgotten about what happened. But yeah, what April
Yeah.
is saying is that it is biblical. There are times that I apologize for something to someone and they're like, Carter, like, what? I'm like,
Yeah, you
I
carried
needed to
that.
get that off for myself. Like, I was having a conviction about doing you wrong or not being my best self to you. And I want you to know that I acknowledge that. And the right
Mhm.
person will receive that. And the wrong person, when I needed to make amends after my addiction, there were some people that never called me back. And, I made amends on a voicemail, but I did what I had to do. And I was able to say, okay, I can release that. And I think that's what you need, Amanda, is that release of feeling any type of way about how you handled that, like you see the growth in that. And I think that's what's most important.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it just that is the lingering things as we're talking about this. And it's like, okay, and I've really gotten a lot better that when I see some, and not every time, right? I feel like this is a journey and it's not something I feel like one day I can snap my fingers and I've evolved into this
Right.
person I want to become.
No.
I still get triggered, but I'm able to then look back, like step back and go, okay, why did that trigger me? Why did it trigger me in the
Right.
specific way that it did? And then spend that time pausing and reflecting before making a move, for leading from ego
Yep.
or wanting to start something, because here's the thing, our ego does want to do that. It creates these stories and these narratives in our head that play over and over and over and over and over.
And it's not just like the ego wants to, but like energetically, the body strives for the most efficient. So it's not going to just continue to look for new pathways out. It's like, this thing is already going. It's fine wired. I like the analogy of like walking down, like you're going on a hike, right? We went to Sedona, some really fabulous hikes. I didn't bring a machete. I'm not going to go bushwhacking my way through a whole new path to get up to the mountain. I'm going to take the one that's already paved. And that's what our brain does too. So recognition alone destabilizes the pattern.
Well, that's
Step
what I was
one.
gonna is that the pause in between being triggered allows you to think about that. And that's why the pause is so crucial, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it shifts you out of passive engagement of the situation,
Yes.
right? Like you're not just watching yourself go on the loop. It shifts you out of like, oh, wait, I'm recognizing this loop. It's like when you lose your shit on your kid.
Mm.
Right? If you're like me, I'm someone who's like, I'm so intentional because I grew up with such aggression and anger and yelling. It's like, I don't want to do that for my daughter. But like sometimes she'll send me and I'll go up for a pause, but I'll be talking like this, Eden, and sit here. And it's like, and she'll even say, Mom, don't talk to me that way. And I'm like, oh, yeah, whoa, you're right. You don't deserve to be. I'm really feeling a lot of things. I'm frustrated, but you're right. You don't deserve that. And how beautiful is it that you can recognize that? I literally can see myself playing the scene out. And I'm like, ooh, No, not doing that. So the more you become aware of your pattern and the quicker you can recognize, you can literally rewrite the code in real time. And it's not going to be easy because it's inefficient and it's new. But eventually that will become the new loop of like, hey, I don't have to yell at you just because I'm frustrated and I'm like overstimulated. I just need to take a pause by myself. Okay. So
That's so good. I mean, honestly, there's still so many things. April, I don't know how long you have, but I'm over here like,
as long as you want to go, girlfriend, I'm here.
well, one of my big questions is, I would love to know for me watching your journey, I am still confused on where the switch went. You said you met Christina and she
Yes.
posed
Uh
this
huh.
question to you. And I'm like, okay, well, what happened after you asked her about it? Because I feel like you talked about step one, but then went to step 12 and I missed one,
Okay. Yeah.
and I want to hear about it.
Sorry. You were watching the movie in my brain? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, so here's the thing about the Bible. It says, seek and ye shall find. So if your soul, if your spirit is actually divinely curious, like, do you really want to know how this all is, what this all is, why this all is? Seek and you shall find. So when I became a yoga teacher back in 2021, 20, I started reading, like you said, all of the Eastern sacred texts, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads. I got into Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth, and it sounded so relevant and resonant, but it was kind of using the same language that I grew up with in Christianity, but it was so different, but it felt so true. So seek and you shall find. Then a couple years later, I meet you and I have this beautiful restorative moment with my mom because she encouraged me to go to the Bible. And I was like, fuck it, I'll read the Bible so I can prove you wrong once and for all. And then I was like, oh, wait, this sounds like what this said. Oh my God, this also feels true. And so when Christina disrupted my concept of Christ, I was like, what? But seek and ye shall find. So I asked not to get lost or to go woo woo, but to just be like, what are you talking about? And that's what sent me on this path of like, okay, what if Jesus isn't just like his story, and I say just, that's not what I want to say. But if all we come to know about Christ is that he died on a miserable death on the cross, and we don't think about why that had to happen, when that happened, then what are we really doing as Christians? Because we don't actually know if we're not curious about that. And when you think about it using the language of these other things that also resonate about frequency and resonance and energy, people like to look at the stars. God created all of that. Why are you obsessing over the creation when you could obsess over the creator? So why do all of these people have a view into the same truth, but we're all disagreeing to see its interconnectedness? And so she started to talk about Christ as this template to unlock on an unconditional love at like conscious level. He became conscious. God became conscious so that we would know how to be that way. And then she started to disrupt my thinking about like, what is the enemy, the Satan, the devil? What is that? Because that didn't resonate. Like a hell that you burn in forever. Really? A God that's love is going to do that to you? But
Yeah.
when you think about sin as separation, a disconnection, a disintegration, a disharmony, a dis-ease, that makes more sense, you know? So that's how it got me here. And I've just been reading like crazy all of these cool things that have just shifted my understanding and conception of God. It's like always changing.
It's funny because I sent something to Carter earlier and I said, to reduce God to a doctrine is to place infinity inside a box and then argue about the shape of the box.
Yeah, or it's like we all get invited to the same party and we show up to the address, but you go through the front door and I go through the side door and Carter comes in through the basement. Like we're still at the same house. I still hear your footsteps upstairs. I can still see the sun rising over there, but you can't because you're down in the basement. But my window shows that it's the sun rising. Like we're all in the same house. We all just have different vantage points, different experiences of how we got here. But why are we so concerned about what room of the house we're in? Like, why aren't we asking why there's a house here? Yeah. I think about like leaving something practical for the seekers, right? Seek and ye shall find. Lean into the curiosity, recognize the commonality, the common thread, the thing that keeps coming up, the thing that you kind of start seeing everywhere. We call them synchronicities. We call them Easter eggs, is what Christina calls them. Whatever they are, pay attention to them, because if your soul is actually seeking, you're going to find it, and you're going to find it in the way that you need to find it. Like for Carter, a slap in the face and a bunch of fours. Like you will start to pay attention to it. So start there, and then recognize too we call it the fractal position. Like, where are you? What pattern, what loop are you on that you're desperate to get off? Because you write that code too. And sometimes that means dissolving the self. And what does that mean? It means integration. Like Carl Jung says, you have to go in and collect the little pieces of you to put your whole soul back together. And that requires oftentimes sitting with the uncomfortable parts of you, flipping through the Rolodex and spending time witnessing that version of you that you left behind. Sometimes that's restoring with humility connections, recognizing your errors of your way, seeking forgiveness. Like that's all the same narrative of all of these doctrines. Right? It's forgiveness and love and redemption. So, like, step one is recognize your current state, observe the loop, imagine how you want to be off the loop, and spend time growing the space between the stimulus and the response. The stimulus is usually that thing that reminds you that you're on that loop. So, if you can recognize that, hop off. You're going to be disoriented, it's going to feel foreign, but just spend time there, because that is what we call presence. And God is like ceaseless presence. That's what that feels like to me. So that's what I would leave them with.
Well, it's funny. I wanted to point out that, you said, ask and you shall
Seek and ye
receive,
shall
seek and
find.
you will find. And that
Knock and the
is
door will be open. That's the last line of that scripture. You got to participate. Up, up,
right,
up. Yeah.
and of the people that I know that are coming to this same thought process as I think all of us are, have been rigorously praying for the truth to be revealed. In 2020, I think many people's paradigms were completely blown apart. And the prayer that I have been praying for 5 years is, God, if I'm deceived by all of that, where else am I deceived? Where else do I need clarity on? And please provide that. I ask for discernment every day because, I've got some deep religious programming that makes me question things and whether or not I'm on the right path. But God continues to show me the fours, speak to me personally. And I'm not going to ignore that because of something I was once programmed to believe is going to keep me from experiencing how God is communicating to me and making
Yeah, and
herself
who are
known to
we
me.
to think? How dare we have the ego to limit how God communicates? How dare you question that God can use nature, which he does for me, numbers, which he does for you, frequencies and harmonies and music, and how dare you not think that the God, the Father that created all of this wouldn't speak to us on every single level possible. So remember, in the Bible, it says to test the spirit. Do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, for many false prophets have gone out into the world. We're meant to test the spirits. We're meant to question, right? Like, that's the part of the discovery. And then you see, does it align with the ultimate truth that you believe, which is God is love? And, if you're a Christian, Jesus died for you. Not because, you think that he died on the cross, rose 3 days later. so much bigger than that. He showed how to lead a life of humility and self-sacrificial love. We talked about our awakenings happening, most of us in motherhood, because it was our first glimpse into self-sacrificial love, right? So we're meant to question these things, and we do have to have the spirit of discernment. And remember, like I said, he'll trust you with the little, he'll trust you with the lot. If you start wiling out because you saw a bunch of number fours and then you're like doing some weird pagan shit in your basement, like you're probably not going to get very far. But like if you're doing underlord things, it's like, yeah, he's not going to give you much more than that. You need to work that out. But yeah, test the spirits, question these things, and don't just limit yourself to your only religious slant or your implicit bias, right? You got to step out. You got to be willing to step out of your loop to expand.
Love
I
that.
agree.
I love that. And what's perfect is it leeways into exactly what our next episode will be about. And honestly, we're just going to wait to get on that topic because we'll save it for them. It's very, very good. I hope everybody enjoyed. Don't forget to go follow April's podcast as well. Moms Off the Record, April West.
At Moms Off the Record Pod, POD, on Instagram. And then I've been talking quite loosely lately about some of this spiritual stuff because I can't seem to not. So if you want to follow me on that, that's my personal page. Call me Mrs. West. Yeah.
We
And
love
I would
it.
love to encourage your listeners to check out Yeshuani. It's like Yeshua, like Jesus, Yeshuani. She, I think, has a lot of the same language and perception of this that your listeners are probably looking out for too. So we just need more people talking like us, right?
We love to be the vessel to broaden people's mindscapes, whatever verbiage we want to use, because I feel that is what is so important. I mean, we're here to just open the conversation, have the conversation, and talk about it and bring people in that have different perspectives, more knowledge, things like that, because that's what it's all about. It's not about
Truth
aligning.
does not fear being questioned. And
Mhm.
I mean,
No,
all
it
we're
encourages being questioned. That's the only way you can find it. Totally agree. Yeah.
And that's hard for a lot
doing.
of people to encompass after they've been told that that's the opposite of what they should be doing for most of their lives. So, which we'll get into next episode.
Thanks again, April. And thanks y'all for
Thanks
listening.
for having
Thank you
me.
so
Yeah, thanks for your
much.
patience.